Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of the Intentional Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Campion, and I am delighted to be joined today by Dr. Ashley Lucas. Dr. Ashley is the founder and owner of PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition, which helps people lose weight and improve body composition through one-on-one coaching, meal plans, and access to cutting-edge information on nutrition, much of which we discuss in this conversation today. Dr. Ashley earned a PhD in sports nutrition and chronic disease from Virginia Tech. She completed her dietetic internship at The Ohio State University. And her business, by the way, is the official weight loss partner of Clemson University. You could basically do a college football playoff with all of the universities that she is associated with. Dr. Ashley is also an author, a podcast host, and a mom of three, among many other things. We get really specific in this episode about losing weight and improving body composition, and exactly the types of foods that you need to eat if you want to make this happen. I think you're going to get a lot of value out of it. I sure did. Before we dive in, this episode is brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, you already know that I am a massive fan of Athletic Brewing Company. Their non-alcoholic beer has been a major part of my own success living an alcohol-free lifestyle for over a year now. I'm a big fan of both the quality and variety of their brews, everything from IPAs and Goldens to extra dark brews and sours. It really runs the gamut, which helps to keep things interesting. I also love that you can get it delivered straight to your door from athleticbrewing.com. That's super convenient. My favorites are Upside Dawn, a classic craft golden style brew, and Athletic Light, which tastes great and only has 25 calories and 5 carbs. And as Dr. Ashley and I talk about in the following conversation, keeping those carbs down is massively important. Try Athletic Brewing non-alcoholic brews for yourself. Use code WISDOM to get 15% off your first order at athleticbrewing.com. That's code WISDOM at checkout for 15% off your first order. Near beer exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. All right, my friends, here's my conversation with Dr. Ashley Lucas. All right, Dr. Ashley Lucas, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
I'm so excited to have you. I have become kind of familiar with you and your work over the last couple of months. As I think I mentioned to you, I had a really good friend who was a client of yours at PhD Weight Loss. And he walked into your offices in January of this year, weighing about 233 pounds. And he's currently, I asked him last night, at 177. So he's down 56 pounds and he's been singing your praises. So congratulations, whatever you're doing seems to be working, but that's super exciting. And so maybe let's start there. Like, I'd love to hear a little bit about PhD Weight Loss and, you know, what you're doing, why you started it, all that kind of stuff. And then maybe we can get into some specifics to try to help people understand some of the basics, some of the basic principles that you teach your clients.
Sure, I'd love to. So PhD, oh my gosh, it's like we were just talking about our kids. I have 3 kids, but I think I actually have 4 because PhD is one of them. And I started PhD because of my own struggles with weight and health. I was a professional ballet dancer and I got into training as a dancer when I was a really young girl. And my body physically didn't want to do it and I struggled with it and I wasn't naturally very talented. But I have this thing within myself, if someone tells me it's not possible, if there's a naysayer, then I like to show them that I can push through and actually show them that they're wrong and that anything is possible. I'm a fighter for the underdog, I think,
Awesome.
which is one of the reasons why I love what I do because I've been there. And I constantly struggled with my weight, was told that I was fat all the time, despite counting calories and doing everything that we're told to do to drop weight. We're told that you just need to move more, exercise more, and eat less, and you'll achieve your goals. And I did that, and I always struggled. And I always, as a result of probably under eating and not feeding my body the way that it really needed to be fed as that type of high performance athlete, I was injured all the time. I had stress fractures in both of my feet. I had a stress fracture in my back that I'm still dealing with the outcomes and aftermath of not taking care of it the way that I should have. And despite that, I had a fairly successful career. I danced in professional companies across the country. I performed in the Olympics, in the Salt Lake Winter Olympics. That was a really fun opportunity. And then I was chosen to perform up in New York City, every dancer's dream. And instead of finding myself in those performances, those once-in-a-lifetime shows, I landed myself in the ER, having no idea what was going on with my health. I thought I was having a heart attack. And the doctors said after a whole bunch of different tests that I was just underfed and overexercised and that I couldn't continue doing it anymore. And so that really shifted my life. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. As any professional elite level athlete knows, it kind of becomes your identity. And that's who I was, all that I knew, all that I had worked towards since I was probably 3 years old. And I was in my mid-20s at the time. Kind of like Michael Phelps being at the starting line of a race and them carting him off to the ER saying, you can't do this anymore. I mean, what is it? What is your life going to be like? What are you going to do? And so I understood how significantly nutrition impacted my own performance. I have a love for the physical body. I think we're here on earth in this physical body to experience life in a physical way. And so I decided to go back to school and earn my PhD in sports nutrition and chronic disease and understand what happens to metabolism when we chronically undereat. How do we drop weight in a sustainable way? Because I knew there had to be a way, and it had to be different than what I had done that we are always told to do by just eating less and moving more. And then I also wanted to understand the behavioral aspects associated with making change, the mental, emotional, the habits, behaviors. It has to be more than just what we eat and when we eat. There has to be thought and mindset involved as well. So I studied that and started to work at The Ohio State University and educate and do research. And I recognized there that I'm not a very patient person. I need to see dramatic change in people like your friend. I need to see people drop 60 pounds in a pretty quick time to be satisfied with what I'm doing. So I went back to school to become a registered dietitian. I thought that's what I needed to do to become a true expert in the field. But I was taught all the same things that I did when I was dancing. I was taught that you just need to eat everything in moderation. You need to have more willpower. You need to eat everything that's low fat. You need 6 to 11 servings of grain a day, even if you're diabetic, which just blew my mind because metabolically it didn't make sense. And so I started to question everything and get really curious. And I thought, well, what happens if we do the exact opposite of what we're told to do? And I started to research and put my research together from my doctoral degree and started PhD specifically for athletes because that was where I came from. And I wanted to help athletes optimize their performance, be able to be faster and work out longer and optimize their body composition. But what I found had a profound impact on those athletes, had a more significant impact on those of us who are struggling with excess fat weight. You know, right now, 88% of us in the U.S. are metabolically unwell. About 72% of us are obese or overweight. And I thought, you know, I really need to create massive impact in people's lives in a significant way, and was able to do that through PhD and opened one office and then another and then 6 offices later. And now we've got a nationwide presence where we have clients in every state and even internationally. And wow, what we're able to do is really transformative.
Wow. That's a great background. Thank you for that context. And I feel like a lot of your story, you also do a great job on your podcast and on your YouTube content of talking about all of this. So I want to just give that a plug up front because that's how I feel like I've gotten to know you a little bit is, especially, I found myself on vacation a few weeks ago, walking on a beach in Kiowa Island, South Carolina, and binging all of your podcast episodes. And it was awesome. Not only hearing your story, but also just hearing some of the philosophies and principles that you talk about. So
that's great.
One of the things, I want to talk a little bit about, metabolic health and what that actually means. So maybe if I can ask you a little two-part question here. One is if you can kind of define metabolic health, and then maybe let's talk about visceral fat, because I know that's a big component and a big thing that you're targeting with your clients. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that and why that's so important.
Yeah. So metabolic health, well, I would say when I say 88% of us are metabolically unwell, that means that we're dealing with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, all of these scenarios where our metabolism isn't working the way that it should be. One where our metabolism is more trending toward an inflammatory state. It could be even propensity to develop autoimmune conditions. It could be joint pain, skin irritation, all of these unique negative health consequences that pop up as a result of our metabolism being dysfunctional or damaged because of how we've eaten throughout our history.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about metabolic health, visceral fat comes into play. And visceral fat specifically is the belly fat. And it's not the fat that you can pinch or melt or sculpt or freeze away. It's the type of fat that fills up the organs deep down in your belly area. And it fills them up and it ends up surrounding the organs. It wraps around them like a straitjacket. And over time, once we've had that belly fat in there, that type of fat actually can grow its own blood vessels. It gets its own oxygen supply and it becomes really active. So we now know that these fat cells in the belly are actually active and they have their own agenda. All they want to do is get bigger and get fatter as fast as possible. And a lot of us don't recognize that this belly fat is metabolically active and can lead to enhancing all of these negative health consequences that I just mentioned. And if you carry this belly fat, you're going to see that it's more difficult to see the positive outcomes of positive action. So what I mean by that is, let's say there's a guy who's lifting weights and doesn't have the visceral fat, and then there's another fellow who's lifting the same amount of weights but does have the visceral fat. The fellow with the visceral fat's not going to see the same muscle gains and the same positive benefits of the weightlifting that the fellow without the visceral fat would. So it just really changes every aspect of your health and the impact that you get to see from the positive health changes that you're trying to make. Not to say that the positive changes don't make a difference if you're carrying visceral fat, but the outcome is going to be slightly reduced just because of the negative impact this visceral fat has on the system and your metabolism and your body in general.
Yeah. Yeah. So my understanding is that a big part of what you're doing with your clients every day is really targeting that visceral fat and trying to get that down to a minimum. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, I'm curious. So I think about myself and, well, let me just throw it out there. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about myself, and I don't want to make this completely about myself, but sometimes I find that when you get super specific with some of these questions, it can actually help. That can actually be the best way to help people. But like, I think about visceral fat and I'm like, okay, I don't actually know what my current body weight percentage is right now. So I'd be interested. I hear that like DEXA scans are the way to go to figure that out, but I'm curious, do you have a recommended way for measuring body fat? Maybe like the full, expensive way. And then if there's another like cheaper, just like ballpark way to get it done. And then like, do you have a sense for like what would be a good target fat percentage? And I don't know if you would say visceral fat percentage or just a body weight fat percentage. Like what would be a good target for somebody who you would consider quote unquote very fit?
Yeah, great question. So the best way to measure your body composition is going to be through a DEXA scan. And you can go ahead and find different institutions that will do that for you. And if you need help, if anyone listening to this needs help, I can provide some recommendations for that.
They're pretty widespread. I think it's like $100 or something like that. I just have not personally got around to doing it, but yeah.
Yes. And so that's going to be the most accurate. There are some scales that can also measure body composition. And the one that we use in our office is called a Tanita. And it's within 5% accuracy of the DEXA scan. You can also do it through hydrostatic weighing, which they dip you down into a bathtub basically, and they can measure by air displacement. So that's a way. And then there's also a bod pod, but usually that's associated with some kind of university and research, and that's through air displacement actually.
Okay.
So those are a few different ways, but there are those body composition scales that you can also purchase for $50. Probably $25 might be the most inexpensive one, but probably the least accurate. But it can give you a ballpark of where your body composition is.
Okay.
There's another scale called an in-body machine. I really don't like that one.
Okay.
It measures the majority of people significantly leaner than they really are. So not a fan of the in-body.
Have you heard of any apps? Have any apps that are doing this? By any chance?
The apps are going to be linked to the scale. So there's two scales in particular. One is Renpho. It's spelled RENPHO. And there's another scale called Waze, WAYZE, I believe.
Okay.
And they both link to an app, and they will show you your data, your statistics associated with the scales. And it will help you track.
That's interesting. I just heard of this one called Spren, SPREN. It's by Elite HRV. Although I think you have to have like an invite code to use it, but basically it's you take a picture of yourself against like a blank background or something, and allegedly it's supposed to be able to give you some kind of
interesting.
Yeah. So I have yet to get myself an invite to it, but if anyone's listening and wants to. Yeah, the reason why I ask is because there may be a lot of people in my condition who have just been like, I heard about DEXA scan, I just haven't gone and made it happen yet. So I'm just kind of wondering like if there is a like pretty easy way, and also to like track it, because it would seem like something you would want to be able to track like relatively easily over time. Yeah.
And so a lot of these scales have specific types that will measure your visceral fat. And so if you are, I suggest that you get one that measures visceral fat. And again, not 100% accurate. The best way to measure visceral fat would be through an MRI, actually. And right now, those are a little bit expensive, $500, $800. But a lot of people working to get the cost of those down so that they are something where we can raise our hand and say, hey, I'd like to know where my visceral fat is. And we can pop in there and get an MRI of the abdomen and check that out. But again, you can look around. I have some folks who I know who are doing those MRI scans, but those body comp machines will give you a good idea of where that visceral fat is. And most importantly, show you the trend so you can see how things are shifting. Yeah.
Okay. And so what do you think would be, and I think this varies by gender, doesn't it? But what would be like good target numbers, or is that too hard to generalize?
Well, we can have target numbers for body fat, and that's easy to generalize. The most important thing to recognize is that BMI isn't a good indicator of health. So if you're listening to this and your doctor says your BMI is too high, well, you can have actually a great body composition and have a high BMI. So my husband, for example, he carries a lot of muscle, but is pretty fit. His body fat percentage is 14%. Which is a great body fat percentage for a guy who's around 40, 45 years old. But he carries a lot of muscle. So he weighs more than the average guy, his age and height. So his BMI is going to look like it's high. So that's one thing to recognize, is that BMI is not necessarily a good indicator of health, but body fat percentage is. Because that tells you the percentage of fat that your body is carrying. And that's what you want to know. And all of these scales that we talked about measure it. And so that is dictated by age, but someone who's around 40 to 45 years old, and if you're a guy, I'd like to see your body fat percentage below 18%.
Okay.
If you're older than 40 to 45, really anything lower than 20% is pretty good for a guy.
Okay,
for
cool.
most women, I'd like to see them no higher than 28%. So as women, we carry more fat, usually in the hips and the legs, associated with childbearing and all of the things that we need to do. But a good body fat percentage, I would say, for most women is probably 24 to 26%, with 28 being the highest that we'd like to see.
Okay, that's awesome. I love the specifics. Thank you. And I want to get into talking about, how you achieve this and talking about specific foods to eat, not to eat, etc. But let's talk about, let me first say, I think I have the slightly opposite problem from your husband in that, like, my total weight is pretty low. Like, I'm 6'1" and I only weigh like 170, or actually I'm a little bit below that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I suspect that I have a decent amount of visceral fat because I have like and maybe this is TMI for the listeners, I don't know, but I have like the little, I have like some like love, I can get like love handle situation going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I carry that excess weight like around the waist a little bit. And it's like, I think so. I would probably look really good on a BMI standpoint, but I suspect I've got a lot of room to improve that visceral fat and, consequently, I guess the overall metabolic health.
Right. That's right.
Cool. So as part of that, let's talk a little bit, before we get into specific foods, let's talk a little bit about blood glucose and what's happening there and why that's so important. And I will preface this with saying that I've become particularly interested over the last 5 days because I've been wearing one of these CGMs on the back of my arm. So we can talk about that. And
Great. I'm excited to hear about that.
I'm early stage and I have a couple of observations so far, but let's talk about why this is so important.
Yes. So you really want to eat to stabilize your blood glucose levels. That's really what it's all about. When we have massive blood glucose spikes and when they become pretty consistent, that's when we cause damage to the body. So if you think about, you eat some food, I just like to use the example of some oatmeal with maybe a vanilla yogurt. It can be fat-free. It could be all natural, organic. It could be made from pea or almond or cow's milk. You can go to the store and there's so many yogurts out there. So I don't care where it's coming from, but let's just say a vanilla yogurt.
Yep.
And then some blueberries on there. Well, the majority of that breakfast there is coming from a carbohydrate source. So we put that into the gut and it goes out into the bloodstream. It's metabolized pretty much and broken down into sugar. And so that sugar goes out into the bloodstream and it raises your blood glucose levels or your blood sugar levels. Sugar and glucose, let's say, we can use those words synonymously. They mean the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the body can only handle about 1 to 2 teaspoons of sugar at any given time before it becomes a bit toxic to the body. And the body doesn't like to have sugar floating around there in the blood all the time. It gets around the nerves. It causes damages in the nerves. That's why when you're pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, you have neuropathy and you have nerve damage. It impacts your eyes, your feet, everywhere, really. And that's because of the damage that this sugar is doing being stuck in the blood here. So the body wants to get the sugar out of the blood, so it tells the pancreas to secrete insulin. And I want you to imagine that insulin is like a little key and it travels around in the bloodstream and it goes to the muscles and it's supposed to open up the muscle cell. So all this excess sugar from the breakfast can flow into the muscle and then you have the energy to go and walk and run and get on the bike or do whatever you love to do, lift weights. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens over time as we age, for men as testosterone goes down, for women as estrogen goes down during menopause, if we have high stress and high cortisol levels, all the things we go through in our life, I want you to imagine that these muscle cells become a little bit calloused over. So now when insulin travels around, it just bounces off the cell wall and it can't open up the muscle cell. So now the muscle cell is kind of on lockdown. There's a lot of insulin around here, and we don't like insulin because insulin is a fat storage hormone. All it wants to do is help your body store fat. And then you've got all of this sugar in the bloodstream. So they have to work together somehow. So now this insulin is going to help this excess sugar flip over and store as fat. The storage of blood sugar as fat is a protective mechanism for the body against developing type 2 diabetes, if that makes sense, right? It's got one option. That sugar has to go somewhere. So it's either going to flip over and store as fat, or it's going to stay in the bloodstream and you're going to become diabetic. So that's the deal. That's why you want to eat to support even blood glucose levels throughout the day. So you don't have these spikes and you don't have a chronically high level of blood glucose or blood sugar in the bloodstream. Now, if you also have these spikes and this chronic level of sugar in the blood, well, it creates different unstable molecules in your body that also create negative health consequences. One of them are called AGEs, and this is when the sugar molecules bind to a protein in your blood and cause these different unique molecules called AGEs, and these promote rapid aging and wrinkles and issues with your connective tissue. If we look at someone who has a lot of AGEs and a lot of high blood glucose often in the body, the connective tissues and the muscles are a bit more brown. It kind of looks like leather that you would put out in the sun, and it cracks easily and it's hard and it ages. And that's what this causes. It also causes free radicals, and you've probably heard of free radicals. And free radicals are unstable molecules in the body. They want to be more stable, so they go around the other stable molecules in your body and steal electrons, trying to make themselves more stable, but it doesn't. So now you've got lots of unstable molecules, and it's linked to cancer and heart disease and all of these things. So those are some of the reasons why you want to have stable blood glucose levels. It also can wear out your adrenals. It can cause chronic fatigue. Lots of negative things that you don't want.
Wow. Okay. Lots of stuff going on there. Okay. So we want to keep our blood glucose levels as stable as possible, I guess. And especially if we think of it in terms of fat storage, it's almost like you're really encouraging additional fat accumulation if your blood sugar is all over the place. Now, do you, again, I don't know if this makes sense to get so specific or not, but is there like a target level where you would like to see blood glucose levels?
That's a great question. So generally a healthy amount is for fasting blood glucose levels is under 100, but usually 80 to 100 is a healthy level to keep them at. Okay.
All right. So let me give you my experience over the last 5 days. I'm a total expert now after wearing this thing for 5 days. But so I would say my fasting has been below 100. It's been probably kicking around the low 90s. And there's 2 events that I have noticed. I've been tracking basically everything I've been eating in an app called I think it's called My Carb Manager, to get really super specific about what foods are doing what to the blood sugar. And by the way, for anyone who has questions, I'm currently using something called the Freestyle Libre 3 by Abbott. It's probably one of the more popular CGMs out there. This one was I'm wearing out my welcome at my doctor's office, but I got my doctor to write me a prescription for one, and insurance covered it for 28 days. So it's $37 times 2 for this, if you're wondering what that cost is. And so my experience has been so far, actually what I'm eating, and I'm really focused. This is probably because I've been consuming so much of your content, but I've been really focused on high protein, low carb, really trying to, keep the sugar to a minimum, et cetera. And it's been pretty steady. It's probably, hovers around that 100 to, middle of the day, 100 to maybe 110 level. 2 events in the last 5 days have caused it to spike. One, I was on the golf course with friends, and I cut out alcohol out of my life about a year ago. Okay. And, but I drank 3 non-alcoholic beers, and my blood sugar shot up. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting note. So when I say shot up, it probably went up to like 160 or something like that. And then it crashed back down pretty quick. The other one, and by the way, this episode is sponsored by Athletic Brewing Company. That tends to be lower carb. I was drinking Heineken 0.0s, and those are like 16 carbs each. So I just want to note that. The other thing, I was at a MLS soccer game here in Charlotte with my family 2 nights ago, and I ate a bratwurst with like a hot dog bun. And then my 3-year-old, we bought him a hot dog and he didn't eat it. So I was like, all right, I'll just eat it. So I ate that. So I ended up having 2 hot dog buns. That sent my blood glucose levels skyrocketing. It went above 200 and then it came back down. So I don't know. Does that sound normal to you, or what do you think? I mean, is that how you would be looking at it? Just like trial and error in terms of seeing what? Yeah.
Yep. And it's different for each person. On what foods trigger that spike. But I think that's great. Isn't that eye-opening?
It is. It's really eye-opening. Is there any, like when you work with your clients, are there any foods that are like surprising that people are, I guess I'm kind of wondering like how individual is it in terms of which foods affect which people? And are there any common foods that people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that does that to my blood sugar?
Yeah, so I would say common foods that are surprising for most people that spike glucose are beans, tortilla chips, and oatmeal for a lot of people. Yep. Now, some are sensitive to green beans, and green beans might cause it to spike, whereas if I eat them, doesn't cause it.
Yep.
Some people, if they eat too much protein for their body and what it can tolerate, it then causes a spike. So it really does vary according to the individual. If they're having, more of a genetic predisposition toward type 2 diabetes, they're going to be more sensitive. If they're right on the cusp, they're going to be more sensitive. So, yeah, but I do think beans, quinoa, tortilla chips, oatmeal, sweet potatoes sometimes for some people spike the glucose much more than you would expect.
Okay. Yeah. In my very early experience, I've also noticed that like eating a more complex meal, so to speak, maybe can help against a spike. So like last night I had a salad and it had a bunch of stuff in it. It had like mozzarella cheese, it had cucumbers, it had avocado, it had blueberries were in there. It had like 10 different ingredients, and I didn't really see much of a spike based on that. So does that make sense to you?
Yes, more fiber is going to help blunt the spike. Did you have some protein with that salad?
Yeah, I had a grilled chicken on there as well.
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, cool. Do you have any particular recommendations when it comes to CGMs? Like, is there any one that you like in particular, or?
Yeah, so there's a brand, NutriSense, that I do like, and it comes with data tracking. So that's my favorite. And there's a new brand out there. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I'm going to spell it for you. It's SIGNOS.
Okay.
And so that's another brand that I hear is good.
Okay.
And uses a really great CGM brand with good tracking. I don't necessarily recommend the coaching, but I do think that the tracking and the sensors are pretty accurate there with those two. If you don't do what you did, which was very wise, and go to your doctor and just ask for support.
Yeah, like I said, I think I'm wearing out my welcome there because I've got all kinds of tests I've got him to write me prescriptions for. But have you read Outlive by Peter Attia by any chance?
I see that behind you actually, and yes, I have. And I love Peter Attia and all of his work.
He's awesome, and but that book is probably responsible for many additional tests from my doctor and everything. I actually have a cardiologist coming on this podcast next week where we're going to be diving into like lipid panels and all that kind of stuff.
Great.
But yeah, I highly recommend that book too. And it's been, it's given me a lot of great ideas on the sort of preventative medicine side in terms of, things to test and things to monitor and all that kind of stuff. But he's a big fan of CGMs as well.
He is. What are the 2 biggest takeaways that you've had from all of this experimenting?
I mean, for me, it's almost like I guess one of the big ones is I think about, the chapter that Atia had on the heart, it's called The Ticker.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really eye-opening. And for people who don't know, about this book, basically he looks at like the 5 things that are most likely to kill you. So it's like cancer and heart disease and dementia, et cetera. And what can you do proactively to reduce your chances of dying from these, or at least increasing your health span as much as possible. So for me, a lot of the one of the biggest takeaways is focusing on heart health, and I thought some of the stuff around cholesterol and how if you can keep your LDL cholesterol as low as possible over as long a time as possible, that really increases your chances of not having heart issues. So that's been one thing. I actually just had a stress test last Friday, so I got on the treadmill and all that. I mean, honestly, I'm probably overdoing it. I think most people would say I'm probably overdoing it, but I just enjoy it. Like I really to me, like more information is better. I'm like, give me all of the information, and then it helps me to make better decisions. And I'll say one more thing on that. I would say the tracking of, so I've been using this app, My Carb Manager. I think MyFitnessPal is very similar, and I think this is something that you do at PhD Weight Loss is, you're really focused on making sure everybody knows what is going in their body at all times. And so for me, the act of, and I don't know if this is sustainable, but I think it's sustainable in spurts, but the act of just logging everything that goes into your mouth, like even if you do it for a month, it's, what I actually think it is? I think there's a little bit of friction in that you're like, oh yeah, I could go grab like 3 handfuls of cereal right now at 9:30 p.m., but then I'm going to have to put it in the app.
That's right.
And that is going to be so annoying. And so that added friction stops me from doing it.
That and the accountability of having to see it actually.
So that is something that, so tell me about accountability, because I think that's honestly, as I think about what I'm doing just as a one person solo effort versus what you're doing with all your clients and all the success they're having, I think for me, the missing piece is the accountability, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Oh, accountability is everything. It's huge. 95% of diets we do on our own fail. And the biggest reason is because we don't have that accountability. We don't have that outside perspective. If we are just the only ones holding ourselves accountable, then we can get too emotional in there. And our emotions don't usually drive the best actions. And so you need someone outside to tell you the truth, to hold you accountable, and also to figure out what you need to tweak, because it is really complicated. Weight loss is so much more complicated than calories in and calories out, especially if you've been struggling with it for a long time. And I always like to equate it to having a coach, and we could use it for you for golfing, for example. The best athletes have coaches, and even recreationally active athletes have coaches. And if you were out there out there golfing and you had a really tough time with your swing, you could try to change all these different things and get in there and probably get pretty pissed at yourself that it's not working. And you'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to give up. Today is just not my day. And then you go back and maybe you repeat that again. Like, what the heck is going on? You get really mad and emotional. Whereas if you had someone who could just be like, Greg, let's just move your elbow over a millimeter. Let's bend forward a little bit more. And then I want you to just tap it like this. And it would make a world of difference. And you'd collapse time and have made the change and get on with it and move on and not feel like a failure, but feel like a success instead. They help you stack wins. We have this negative connotation associated with getting help and accountability when it comes to weight loss. For some reason, we feel like we should be able to do it on our own. We feel like it should be easy, but it is complicated, more complicated than a golf swing, I would say.
I love yes, I think I need help in both areas. So that the accountability, I'm sure would be a huge component of that.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what people should be thinking about putting in their mouths, actually, if they want to improve their body composition. And maybe I'd like to actually get specific and talk about breakfast, lunch, and dinner, snacks, etc. But let's start high level. So if somebody walks into one of your locations, or maybe they're doing the remote kind of national program that you mentioned, and where do you start high level? So if you think about things like macros and calories and carbs, like I'm curious if you have targets for those things, or how do you even start?
So everybody's different, I'm going to say. Everyone is unique in where they're coming in. There might be someone who is diabetic. There might be someone who is coming in with 200 pounds of excess fat weight they need to drop, or someone who has 10 pounds. So that really does dictate where we go with the macros and the details. So there's not an overarching, everyone's going to start here. Everybody is different. And that's what makes us very unique, is that we create customized plans for each person, guiding them on exactly what, when, and how much they're going to eat. In general, I never count calories. I can't tell you how many calories one person on PhD is consuming, because to me, it's not about that. It really is about finding that stabilization of blood glucose levels. And so for us, we make sure that we're protein forward. We want to make sure that every person is getting the amount of protein they need to support their muscle mass, because most often when we go about losing weight, we lose significant muscle mass because we're dropping our protein levels too much. So we make sure that everyone is right where they need to be. For most people, I would say, and I'm not talking about PhD clients specifically, but if you're looking to optimize your health, a good goal is about 1 gram of protein per pound optimal body weight. So if you are a guy and you're 250 pounds, but you should weigh 170, then you might start by targeting 170 grams of protein in a day. The most important meals of the day to get adequate protein is the first meal and the last meal of the day. It doesn't matter when that first meal is, but you want to make sure that you target, for a man, probably 40 to 50 grams. And for a woman, 30 to 40 grams of protein with that first meal and that last meal of the day, because that bolus of protein triggers your body to synthesize and maintain muscle mass. And muscle mass is the key to longevity. It's your metabolic currency. It's everything to you. So everything you do wants to be associated with maintaining or building more muscle mass, especially as we continue to age.
Okay. I thought I was eating high protein already, but now that I just heard you say that, I don't know if I'm eating enough. So, okay, so let me give you some numbers here, and then let's talk about what that actually means in terms of food. So, just for reference, so my target body weight is about 170. I actually, there's no science behind that. That's just like me. Like I've actually hovered around that, and that's kind of where I usually am. But so for me, I might be a little bit different than like a normal PhD client, in that I'm not necessarily looking to lose weight, but like I said, I would be looking to improve body composition. So more muscle, less visceral fat, et cetera. But like, so if you go that 1 gram per pound of body weight, so that in theory, maybe I should be eating as much as 170 grams of protein. That's quite a bit. I've been eating closer to probably about 130-ish, I would say. And I've been trying to keep my carbs around 100 grams. So we can talk about that, but let me tell you what I've been eating for breakfast to start. And I want to get your opinions on breakfast, generally, given that it's so important, along with dinner. So what I've been eating is 1 Oikos yogurt. Okay, so I think this is Dr. Ashley approved in some ways, but not in other ways. Let's see. So it's the 000. It's 15 grams of protein, good, but 0 grams of fat, probably not great. Okay, so I've eaten 1 of those. I eat it alongside a Breakstone's cottage cheese. Okay, this is also kind of low fat, which is not necessarily what we're going for. About 2 grams fat, 7 carbohydrate, 13 protein, and then I usually will throw like 15 almonds on top of that. And then I also have a iced coffee. It's black iced coffee that I throw heavy cream in because I've been listening to your content. Right. And it's so delicious. And then I also have an athletic green supplement, which I looked at the label. I actually have it in front of me here. I'm
familiar with it.
Okay, yeah. That's pretty low carb. It's only like 6 grams of carbs. So anyways, this is what I've eaten to date. So I have my app here, so I can actually just tell you that. So far today, I have eaten 23 carbs, 33 grams of protein, and 36 grams of fat. Am I doing it right? What do you say to that breakfast?
I would say that the breakfast is decent. I'd like to see a little bit more protein in there. So maybe you could let go of the yogurt. You could do the cottage cheese and 2 eggs. Maybe some egg whites in there to get the protein up, and then keep the rest the same. Okay. That I don't generally get anything fat-free or recommend anything fat-free like that yogurt, but you're getting your fats in your heavy cream and your almonds, so you're making up for it. So I wouldn't say I would say if you just ate that fat-free yogurt, I'd say, oh man, you're missing out. Right. But you're making up for it in the other things.
I have not noticed a material blood glucose spike eating that altogether, but no, I might see one based on how you've described things. I might see one if I ate the yogurt just on its own.
You might, but it's pretty low in carbs too, isn't it? That yogurt. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So I don't think that you would see much. Okay. The issue with eating no fat is that you would get hungry quicker. The fat is for fullness and satiety and to help you absorb the vitamins and minerals that you're getting in your athletic greens even. So that's why you want fats, but you're getting plenty of.
That's a really good point. Okay, so I know you've got some views about cow's milk versus almond milk versus oat milk. What are you thinking there?
So cow's milk I look at, and I know this makes some people upset because they really like their milk. But cow's milk does spike glucose pretty significantly and more rapidly than other types of unsweetened nut milk. So let's see if I can remember this value. But I think dairy in the form of cow's milk spikes blood glucose 6 times higher than an unsweetened nut milk would. So cow's milk is really for a baby calf that's in growth mode. We don't want to be in growth mode anymore. We really don't need it. We can get our calcium from other sources. So it's really not necessary. I personally don't drink it and don't love it. I know a lot of people in my circle enjoy raw cow's milk. It's metabolized a little bit differently. So that would be something that you consider. But just regular skim milk, I'd say, skim milk and cereal and a banana on top is one of the worst.
I know. I can't believe it. I was eating that like growing up. The whole time I was growing up, it was like the 0% or skim milk and like cereal. And I'm like, my blood sugar must have been going crazy.
Can you imagine? You should do an experiment and have that for breakfast one day and see what happens and then see how you feel after it.
Yeah. That's why I could have gotten much better grades in school if I. So what about almond milk or oat milk? Where are you on those?
Oat milk and the processing of it is really high glycemic, meaning that it spikes your glucose. So there was a study looking at oat milk versus unsweetened nut milk, and the oat milk spiked folks' blood glucose by 29 points. And the unsweetened nut milk spiked it by 9 points. So big difference there. Do not get your oat milk lattes. I'd say that's one of the biggest shifts that I see for folks come in. You know, they say, don't touch my coffee. I like my coffee the way that it is. And I understand that. We are very loyal to the way that we like to drink our coffee in the morning. And so I respect that. But most often when I say, hey, have a little heavy cream in your coffee, people are like, really? I can do that? And they let go of the oat milk with joy and replace it with a little bit of heavy cream, and it's delicious, and they drop a lot of weight as a result of shifting the milk sources that they're consuming during the day.
Yeah, that makes sense. Love the heavy cream. It's so good. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, and I I do like an unsweetened almond milk as well.
Yes.
That's a staple in our
Yeah.
refrigerator as well. Anything else you want to say on breakfast, just generally speaking, or in terms of specific meals? I like your recommendation on the eggs. The only problem I have is that, a lot of people are probably in this boat, is that I'm like usually getting in the car and actually eating breakfast like at the office sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so eggs, it's a little harder to travel with them. But anything else you want to say on that?
I mean, you could make frittatas or little muffin frittatas of eggs, and heat them up and put them in a Tupperware and bring them with you. Mm-hmm. You could do hard-boiled eggs if you wanted to do that, and you could travel with those. You could make, if you wanted a protein shake that has 40 grams in it and stick the yogurt in there and blend it all together if you wanted to do that and get the protein. You could add some protein powder into the yogurt or even some collagen. I know it's not a complete protein, but at least to get your protein up a little bit more. You could put that in there. You could, I generally don't eat breakfast. My first meal of the day is lunch. So I don't even have to worry about it. And I just eat lunch foods, obviously. But breakfast, I think the ticket to success is really thinking savory over sweet. If you try to trend towards savory, then you're going to be better off.
Yeah, that's probably a good rule of thumb. What about, and this is totally contrary to what you just said, but what about any of these prepackaged protein shakes? Like I've messed around a little bit with Fairlife has a pretty good like chocolate protein shake that's like 30 grams of protein. I'm trying the muscle milk one right now, which I don't like as much. I think I'm going to go back to Fairlife. But what do you think about adding one of those in?
Fairlife, I'm familiar with their milk, and their milk is a better option because it is lower sugar. But I don't know how many grams of carbohydrate is in that brand of specific.
I have to check. I think it's pretty low. I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, I think it's pretty low. Okay, cool. And you mentioned you're familiar with Athletic Greens. Any strong views one way or the other there?
So I don't love them.
Okay.
And the reason why is I like to think about food in a way that you would eat it naturally, that we're supposed to eat food. Like how many bunches of kale or what amount of greens is in that powder when we're meant to chew our food and eat like a salad? Is it 10 salads in there that you're getting in one scoop? It just isn't really a natural way of getting food in the way that we are supposed to. I've seen it also cause a lot of bloating and issues for people who are sensitive to wheat, not gluten in particular. There's different allergies and sensitivities out there. Some people are sensitive to gluten. Some people are sensitive to wheat. And it's just inflammatory for some folks. For me specifically, really caused bloating, made my stomach look like I was about 5 months pregnant. And I did not feel good with it. So I don't think it's the cure-all for what they're saying it is. And I think we need to be aware of if it makes sense, if we can actually eat it the way that humans are supposed to eat. So I do have a little concern with those greens and the density.
They're probably not going to be sponsoring the Dr. Ashley show anytime soon then.
No.
Okay. That's good to get that context. And I agree that I like the sort of common sense approach around, we're meant to, chew food and get certain amount of nutrients in our foods naturally and all that kind of stuff. I mean, do you typically recommend that your clients are taking any kind of supplements, whether it's omega-3s or anything else?
Yes. So generally when you're eating a nice, healthy, nutrient-dense diet, you don't need to take a ton of supplements. I'm a fan of understanding your unique needs so you don't just have expensive urine and you're taking the supplements that you actually need, and that's different for each person.
Yeah.
But there are some that most of us are deficient in, and that would be our omegas. Omegas are important to take. specifically cod liver oil. Man, I have a liquid form and it's so hard for me to take. So I also have it in capsules.
Oh, okay.
When you take cod liver, it's helpful to take it with a vitamin E to help absorption of it.
Okay.
Learning more and more lately about copper and us being pretty deficient in copper and vitamin A. And you get vitamin A from cod liver, and you also get an active form of vitamin D from the cod liver oil as well. So I haven't recommended to our clients yet to take copper because I'm still in the investigation state for me and research state for that.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of vitamin A from beef liver. So I am a fan of consuming organ meat if you're open to it. I don't love the taste of it, so I have a unique way of getting it down, which sounds very odd. But for those who don't mind it, just cooking up beef liver or onions. There's a lot of different ground meats out there where you can get the beef organs ground in it. Earth Fare specifically around here has that ancestral brand, and they have, beef organ and liver and heart in there mixed up with the ground beef. So that's a good way to get it. This sounds nasty, but I'll share it with you anyway. What I do is I get frozen beef liver and I will chop it into tiny pieces and freeze it and either drop it in the smoothie where you can't taste it, but I still swear I can taste it. I'm like that sensitive to it. So I might even just get little bits of it and swallow it with a glass of water like I'm taking a capsule.
Okay. Yeah.
And that is the best way for me to get it down.
Okay. Interesting.
Vitamin D, most of us are deficient in.
Yep.
But a lot of research that I'm investigating right now showing that if we take even the active form of vitamin D in a supplement, we're skipping a lot of the cascade of events that it goes through. That's important for us too. So really getting out in the sun is the most important thing. But the tricky part about that is if we wear an SPF of 15 or above, we block 99% of the production of it. And we only produce the active form from the hours of 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. the majority of the year, and from May through October. So once we hit October and we get out there, we're not producing the active form. So there are some specific lights that you just place in front of your body and you sit there for about 5 to 10 minutes. And it acts to convert vitamin D into the active form the natural way it's supposed to. So that is interesting. And then for folks who are dropping significant weight, I do think it's a good idea to get tested if you have any previous or pre-existing deficiencies in vitamins, minerals, and thinking about replacing those specifically. And then I'd say that the last one that most of us are deficient in is magnesium. It's really hard to get adequate magnesium just because our soil is pretty darn deplete. So for me personally, I take magnesium bisglycinate, and then I have a magnesium spray that I put on my skin to absorb that way because we need it in multiple ways to absorb it and get sufficient amounts.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Is that the magnesium? Do you take that before bed? I know a lot of people take magnesium to help with sleep as well.
Yeah, that can be helpful that way.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I did check that Fairlife shake, by the way, and it's got 3 grams of carbohydrates, so pretty low carbs.
I think that would be fine then to take if you need something convenient and speedy.
Yeah. I like that brand as well. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I do too. If someone's going to drink milk, I usually suggest that.
Okay. Okay. Lunch and dinner. Anything that's you want to mention specifically that folks should be thinking about as they think about, putting together a healthy lunch and a healthy dinner to help them hit the right macros? Yeah.
So again, we're targeting about 30 to 40 grams of protein, maybe 40 to 50 for a man. And, if you're open to eating red meat, it's got lots of great things in there: zinc, carnitine, B vitamins, all things that you need to help with testosterone production. So I would say considering getting some of that in there. If you can eat some fish once in a while to get those omega-3s, that's going to be helpful. Making sure that you don't skimp on the fat. Don't choose fat-free salad dressings. Always choose full fat.
Are there any brands of salad dressing that you like? Because that can be hard. There's like sugar hiding in so many different salad dressings.
Yes, there's sugar hiding in there and vegetable oils that we don't necessarily love. So Primal Kitchen is a good brand because it's made with no sugar and avocado oil, which is a great stable type of oil. Or you could always just get your own olive oil and balsamic vinegar and put that on the top. So
cool. I like that. I like that Primal Kitchen as well. I have a couple of varieties of their salad dressings as well. Yeah, I'm a salad guy for lunch every day. And there's a lot you can do with that. And then dinner, it's more protein plus vegetables is kind of the way to go. My big problem is I do have a sweet tooth, and I have this thing. It's probably a lot of people have it, I'm guessing. It's like after I finish a meal, I'm like, oh, I just need that little sweet thing to like cap it off. And I think that's a little bit of an addiction that I should probably try to kick. But the way I deal with it, dark chocolate. So I am like a dark chocolate after dinner guy, like every night. And that, what do you think about that? Am I just like feeding an addiction, or is that, well, what do you think about that?
I think that, I mean, we never want to be slave to anything, right? So if you feel like, oh my gosh, I cannot do without it, it could be a fun practice to do without it for a week, just to be like, hey, I can do this if I want to. You know, I'm in control here. I'm not negotiating with my body, and I can handle this. But I would say dark chocolate's totally fine. And if you just have a piece of it and it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I cannot stop eating, I have a piece of chocolate and then I have the whole bar and then I have the next thing, then it seems like it's something that's very manageable and something that's healthy for you to enjoy. So I like to switch things up. I might go sometime where I don't have anything. I might have some days where I have a piece of chocolate, but I can have just a piece and feel fine with it. I like to have Rishi hot chocolate, actually. Four Sigmatic is the brand. And it's pretty delicious. And I, of course, put a little heavy cream in there and enjoy that.
I'm not familiar with this. This sounds like I might have to check it out. Okay. Yeah.
So that's pretty fun to do. And then sometimes my husband, if he actually gets hungry after dinner, he might have some bone broth or some chicken broth. Now, it sounds a little bit odd, but the salt and the savory of it actually cuts it. The desire for food. Sometimes it's just a craving, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What about snacks? We didn't talk much about that. Are you okay with people snacking, or would you rather avoid it? And I guess if we can snack, or depending on what you're trying to do, curious if you have recommendations on snacks.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that you're getting your protein, like I said, in a bolus, in an amount that triggers protein synthesis and muscle support. So that means you don't want to dribble the protein all throughout the day. You don't want to graze throughout the day because it's not going to trigger that response in the body. So it is really important that you at least have those 2 meals. Ideally, you'd have breakfast, lunch, snack, or you'd have you'd skip breakfast. If you're not a breakfast person, you have that 1 meal at lunch and then the meal at dinner.
Are you okay with the 3 meals? Like a full?
I'm fine with the 3 meals.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But for some people, they don't really feel that they want breakfast and they don't need it. And I think that's fine to do as long as that first meal of the day has that amount of protein we talked about. I do find, specifically if weight loss is a goal, that a mid-afternoon snack is really helpful. And I would say that if weight loss is a goal, that should be a non-negotiable, because a lot of us go into dinner being very ravenous. I don't want you to go into dinner being that hungry. I want you to feel like you're in control and you could really eat, or you don't need to eat, or if it's delayed because something happens with the kids or the grandkids, whatever that is, that you're not going to feel like you're going to die or like you could eat an entire cow.
So I have 2 danger periods. One is when I get home from work and my wife is a great cook and she's usually cooking dinner, but I'm starving and I will like dominate handfuls of peanuts like while I'm waiting for that. And the other is like later on in the evening, particularly if I have something that I'm worried about or some high stress thing. That's the danger period where I could end up like in front of a pantry. Right. Yeah. So Well, I want to talk about stress eating in a second, but let's finish the discussion on snacking. So mid-afternoon snack, you'd see that as a staple for people who are, focused on weight loss.
Yes, that's right.
Yep.
So again, something protein forward,
Mm-hmm.
something that's going to be satisfying, something that has some fats in there. So that could be, if you haven't had eggs that day, you could have some hard-boiled eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Get a protein bar that's convenient that you like.
Okay, brands again. Sorry, I'm going to hassle you with brands, but
So I would say brands that I like would be Quest Bar.
Okay.
Has a good amount of protein in it.
Mm.
Let's see. Power Crunch has about 15, 20 grams, so it's a little bit lower, but decent. The Kind bars, but more of the chocolate sea salt caramel brands, not the fruity ones, because the fruity ones pump up the carbs there.
Okay.
There are Good Fats is another brand that hurts my stomach, but some people like that brand. Another one called Nugo Slim.
Sorry, I've noticed some of the stuff with like the fake sugar, like what is it, erythritol or something like that? Erythritol. I think that doesn't agree with me.
Yes, you have to find the ones that are okay.
Yeah. Sorry, you were saying one more?
What was I saying? Oh, Nugo Slim. It's a vegan one. If someone's vegan,
mm-hmm.
that one bothers my stomach.
Okay.
But a good goal is to make sure that it has, less than 15 grams of carbs and more than 15 grams of protein and a little bit of fat. That's really what you're looking for.
That's a good rule of thumb. Perfect Bar? Have those come across your radar?
Perfect Bar, I think, are a bit carby for me.
Okay. I noticed that those have to be refrigerated, so I kind of like, maybe that's a good thing, That's
what we think. They're so, so sweet.
Okay.
Eat one and let me know what it does to your CGM.
All right. We'll have to trial that later today. Yeah. Okay, cool. I like beef jerky as well.
Yes.
And there's a brand called Chomps that I enjoy that's like no sugar.
That's right.
Yeah.
Another brand of beef jerky I really like is called Carnivore Snacks.
Okay.
SNS.
Cool.
It's really good.
Okay, cool. Let me check that out. Awesome. Okay. I know we're probably starting to run out of time, but I just have so many questions for you. Let me just ask you this one real quick. Any brands for kids snacks? I know you and I are both parents of 3, and we probably both share struggles with getting our kids to eat anything close to healthy. Any rules of thumb or brands that you would recommend?
Yeah, so the same thing for them is making sure I always make sure that they're getting protein.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to eat something that has sugar in it, I'm like, okay, your protein first. Or my kids really love frozen fruit. And even with that, like they could eat bowls of frozen mango or frozen cherries, frozen blueberries. They love that. And so I'll always say, what protein are you going to eat with it? They love salami. I cannot think of the brand right now, but we buy them 10 at a time. And they're hard salamis. They're tiny and they're thin.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to send you the name and maybe you can put it in the notes of this. But they love those. They do love salami. They'll eat hard-boiled eggs. They'll have carrots with hummus.
Mm-hmm.
They like protein bars, but they like the PhD. We have PhD protein bars that our clients get.
Mm-hmm.
So I bring those home.
Yes, my friend has been eating many of them.
I know. Yeah, we have protein-based hot cocoa and oatmeal that they love. So they'll have that for snacks. We're fortunate there. They really like seaweed, the little seaweed snacks, but I always make sure that I get it, that it's cooked in avocado oil, not a vegetable oil or even olive oil, because avocado oil has a high smoke point there.
Okay.
Let's see what else. They do have Power Crunch Kid bars that are pretty tasty that they like. They really do love, we'll get plain full fat Greek yogurt and they put frozen berries and a little bit of honey on top of it and mix it all together. They really like that. They'll eat bananas and peanut butter, string cheese. So even for them, more stuff from the fridge rather than the pantry.
Mm-hmm.
If they like tuna fish and potato chips, and if they have potato chips, I always make sure that they're fried in avocado oil. they like pork rinds, Epic brand, or another brand, 4505, that brand they like. I'm like picturing our pantry right now. And I think
Actually,
that is the majority.
this would be an awesome YouTube video, or I could see a content series for you. Like you do such an awesome job on YouTube and with your podcast and everything. Like people would love a tour of your fridge, especially from like showing with the kids, because getting kids to eat anything close to healthy is such a hard job.
It is hard.
Yeah, but we're with you. I think that's a question we're asking like at every meal, like, okay, well, what protein are you going to eat? You know, like,
yes.
So that's probably a good rule of thumb to try to,
Yeah.
just like us, make sure there is a protein in every meal and snack. You're getting a significant protein source.
Yeah, whenever my daughter was eating, we went to Whole Foods and she wanted pizza and she was eating a piece of pizza. And I said, okay, girl, you can have this, but you know, what's your protein going to be? She's like, is this pizza all sugar too? Because she knows that whenever I say, what's your protein? She's eating sugar. And I was like, well, you know what? Basically, it has the cheese on it, but like there's no protein in pizza. So and she's 4, you know, Mom, is this all sugar?
Yeah.
Or she'll eat a grape and she'll be like, Mom, I know this is all sugar, you know? So I'm just like, but I just love it.
Yeah.
So, and we don't feed them juice because juice is just sugar. You know, so we're just aware of it. But I also, they get treats because I don't want them to go crazy when they're not around us either.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's got to be a balance. But and in terms of like smoothies and stuff like that, my wife makes some really great smoothies for our kids. I know she sneaks in some spinach and stuff like that, but she also puts in protein powder into it, so they're getting some protein along with the sugars. Are you guys do that sort of thing too?
Yeah. So the smoothie that I make them, and then whatever they don't drink, I put into popsicle holders and they eat it as popsicles and freeze it. But
that's a good idea. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I do heavy cream and frozen spinach, a lot of frozen strawberries, full fat plain Greek yogurt. I'll put some scoops of collagen in there. Sometimes I'll have frozen aloe vera in the freezer, and I actually put a little handful of that in there.
Okay. I thought that was just for sunburns, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty good for the gut.
Cool.
Sometimes I have a powdered probiotic that's in the fridge, and I'll put some of that in there. And then I put a scoop of Ultima electrolyte powder in there. I like that. It's raspberry flavored and it sweetens it and gives some electrolytes in there. And then I put a little bit of maple syrup in there to sweeten it to taste. But I don't use much, maybe 2 tablespoons for a big container of smoothie. And then I know this sounds really odd, but I will put a block of frozen beef liver in there.
Yeah. You can't resist putting the beef liver.
I just stick that in because
they probably don't taste it with all that stuff in there.
No, you don't. Yeah. And my son actually, we all had our blood. Most of us had our blood tested, and for some reason, vitamin A was on the requisition, and we all 100% of us were low in vitamin A, including him. So vitamin A really you find unfortunately in liver.
Interesting.
Okay,
cool. Yeah, on the electrolyte side, I've gotten into using some electrolytes myself. I go with the Element brand, LMNT, because it's very low sugar and it's got basically for like endurance workouts, or like I was on baseball fields all day yesterday in like 95 degree heat. Like you got to replenish the salt that you're losing. Okay, we have to wind it up because I know you have other stuff to do today. Let me just ask you 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay.
You can't talk about weight loss these days without mentioning Ozempic and the other GLP1s out there. So these are hitting the world by storm. Some people think it's a wonder drug. It's kind of early to tell around side effects and stuff like that, but I'm sure you're getting questions and all that kind of stuff. So what's your kind of general thoughts right now on Ozempic and the GLP-1 drug class?
So I think that they can be used as a tool, but they can't be used alone. There's no way out but through. Like, there's no magic pill. You've got to do the work. And the deal is with these injections, they can help people drop about 15% of their body weight. We've talked about visceral fat, and if you're carrying significant fat in the belly and you don't fully get rid of it, you don't collapse it, then that fat mass is like a tumor, and all it wants to do is grow and get fatter. We talked about that. If you only let go of a portion of it, then you're going to be at real high risk of it coming back. It hasn't made a dramatic shift in your metabolism if you only lose a portion of it. It's like shaving the top off of a weed and leaving the root. You know it's going to come back. So you drop, let's say, 15% of the body fat. If you stop taking these drugs, then all of the weight that you've lost comes back. You have to take these drugs forever, right now at least, or else it all comes back. And if you've done the drugs just on their own without any lifestyle change, all the weight's just going to come back on. And the research is showing that it comes on pretty darn quickly. The drugs are very expensive. Right now, it's about $1,000 a month for the drugs. Most insurance providers don't cover it. So people are spending $12,000 to $16,000 a year on these drugs. And it's not like a once in a lifetime expense. It's something that has to be, at least at this point, continuous. We're finding that for the majority of people who do drop weight with them, that 2/3 of this weight is muscle mass. So people are becoming lighter, but they're actually becoming fatter. And we just talked a lot about the importance of muscle mass. So I know I probably have a biased viewpoint because I see hundreds of people every week dropping significant weight without the need of any medications. And they can do it in a sustainable way, a natural way. So I think that if someone's interested in dropping some weight and they don't want to change their lifestyle at all, then it can be a helpful tool. But if you want to drop weight and keep it off for the long term, you've got to make lifestyle changes around it. You've got to understand all of the foods that we're talking about and how they impact your body and really make a change from the inside out, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's great context from somebody who is well-versed in this world. So, yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to watch this space develop.
Yeah.
I think, as you say, I think there's probably no substitute for really learning about how different foods and other activities impact your body and learning how to have healthy habits. I think, hopefully these drugs will be helpful to some folks who really need them. And, hopefully the cost will come down over time, which I'm sure it will. But yeah, I'd say, to me, it makes sense when you say, perhaps they can be a tool as opposed to necessarily like take this pill and never worry about obesity ever again. But it could be a tool in the toolkit.
15% weight loss, people will still be obese. It's there's still more work to be done, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I would say that if you've got 30 pounds or less of weight that you need to drop, it is not a viable option. It's not worth the negative side effects. So if 30 pounds or less is plaguing you, you've got to do it through a different means.
Got it. Okay. Well, I have learned a tremendous amount in this conversation. I'm sure our listeners have too. It's been awesome. And like I said, I could just keep asking you questions all day long because I'm super interested in all this stuff and I really value your opinion. But I'm going to bring this conversation to a conclusion, and I want to do so by asking you my standard closing question, which is, what's one thing that you've figured out in life that maybe most others haven't?
Probably the fact that I understand I don't have much figured out.
I might disagree, but okay,
no,
go ahead.
I don't think so. I think that maybe my strength is that I am always curious, always asking questions. If someone or something comes out and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the way it must be, this is the answer. I think, gosh, what if it's actually the opposite? And oftentimes that becomes true, and just continue to learn and accept that I'm not always right.
Yeah. Well, then that makes sense that that's your answer, because that's kind of what happened in your life in terms of learning all of this stuff that didn't actually work, right? And then having to figure it out on your own, what did work. So that's cool. I want to plug your podcast again and your YouTube channel and your Instagram. I have yet to figure out Instagram. It's like this very confusing social network to me. I don't know anything about it, but you seem to be dominating on Instagram. So go follow. Is it Dr. Ashley? What's your handle over there?
Yeah. So on Instagram, it's Dr. Ashley Lucas, Dr._Ashley Lucas. And then the podcast and YouTube channel is the Dr. Ashley Show.
Yeah. And it's really good. So go check that out. You're doing like on your YouTube channel, you post your podcast episodes. You also post these like short, like 5-minute videos on a lot of the subject matter that we talked about today. So I'm getting a lot of value out of it. So, well, thank you so much. And check out PhD Weight Loss.
That's right.
Dr. Ashley's business that is helping thousands of people, including my friend, who is very grateful and now looks very slim and svelte and had to buy new clothes.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but this has been awesome. Ashley, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on here today.
Oh, thanks, Greg. It's my pleasure. And I can't wait to hear more about your journey with the CGM.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, my friend, there you have it, Dr. Ashley Lucas. I'm really grateful that I came across all of her incredible content recently and that she was kind enough to come on the show and speak with me. That was awesome. If you're not following Dr. Ashley on platforms like YouTube and Instagram, make sure to do that. I will link to all of her handles in the show notes. And what we covered today was really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton more to learn, and I think Dr. Ashley does a super job making it accessible for everyone. So you should all go check that out. Again, links to handles are in the show notes. Before you go, 2 things. 1, please make sure to head over to gregcampion.substack.com to subscribe to my newsletter. It's 1 email every other week. If you miss an episode of the podcast, do not worry about it. I recap them all in the newsletter. I also tell you about what I'm experimenting with in my own health, fitness, habits, you name it, and also what content I'm consuming at the moment. That's gregcampion.substack.com to subscribe. And 2, if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving a rating or a review wherever you are listening or watching. And tell a friend about it. Seriously, word of mouth is huge, and any help in spreading some of these positive messages is much appreciated. Well, that is it for today, my friend. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.